I found the album on a Tuesday in November, the kind of day where the sky never fully commits to being light. I'd driven down to my mother's house in Garfield Ridge to help sort through the basement. She was selling the place, had been talking about it for 2 years, and finally listed it in September. The realtor told her the basement needed to be cleared out before showings, and she'd ignored that advice for 6 weeks until I told her I'd come down on my day off and do it myself. My mother is 71. She raised me alone in that house from the time I was 4, after my father left for a job in Tucson and never quite managed to come back. She's not sentimental about most things, but she's a collector of objects she doesn't remember acquiring. The basement had 40 years of evidence: broken humidifiers, a sewing machine no one in the family has ever used, boxes of VHS tapes with nothing written on the spines, a rolled-up rug that smelled like it had been wet since the Clinton administration. I'm 38. I work as a building inspector for the city residential mostly. I spend my days in other people's houses looking for things that are wrong. Foundation cracks, water damage, electrical panels that haven't been updated since the Nixon era. It's not glamorous work, but I'm good at it. I notice things. That's what I do. The album was in a plastic bin under 2 bags of old curtains. Standard photo album, the kind with the peel-back adhesive pages and the clear film you press down over the pictures. Dark green cover, no label. I almost tossed it into the donation pile without opening it, but something about the weight of it felt deliberate, like it had been packed carefully. I sat down on an overturned bucket and opened it. The first page had 4 photos. Me as a baby, maybe 8 months old, sitting on a blanket in what I recognized as the backyard. Summer. The fence in the background was the old wooden one that came down in a storm when I was 12. My mother was in one of the photos, crouched beside me, squinting into the sun. In every photo on that page, there was a woman standing behind me. Not my mother, someone else. She was maybe 15 feet back near the fence. Dark hair, shoulder length, a pale blouse or dress. The photo quality made it hard to tell. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at me. I turned the page. Me at maybe 2 years old, sitting on the front steps with a plastic truck. 2 photos. In both of them across the street, partially behind the neighbor's parked car. The same woman. Same hair. Same posture. Watching. Page after page. Birthday party. I'm maybe 5. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cake. Through the window behind me, in the yard. She's there. Standing near the garage. My mother is in the photo too, leaning over the table to light candles. She's smiling. The woman in the yard isn't smiling. She's just standing. School photo day. I'm in a collared shirt my mother ironed that morning. I remember because it was stiff and I hated it. The photo is taken in front of a blue backdrop in the gym. But there's a second photo on the same page, clearly taken in the schoolyard before or after. Me holding my backpack, looking uncomfortable. And behind me, near the chain-link fence by the parking lot, maybe 30 yards away, a woman. Dark hair, still figure, watching. I went through the entire album sitting on that bucket in my mother's basement. 47 photographs spanning roughly 10 years of my childhood. The woman appeared in 41 of them. She was never in the foreground. Never interacting with anyone, never close enough for her face to be sharp. But she was consistent, the hair, the build, the stillness. Always behind me, always watching. In some photos she was barely visible, a figure at the edge of the frame that you might dismiss as a stranger caught in the background. In others, she was unmistakable, standing in places where a stranger had no reason to be: our backyard, the school corridor visible through a window, the sidewalk outside a restaurant where you could see her through the glass. I closed the album and sat there for a long time. Then I brought it upstairs. My mother was in the kitchen making tea. She has a specific way of doing it. She boils the water in a saucepan because she doesn't trust the electric kettle I bought her. I set the album on the table and opened it to the first page. "Mom, who is this?" She looked at the photo, put on her glasses, looked again. "That's you," she said. "Look at those little legs." "Not me, the woman, behind me, by the fence." She leaned in, squinted, then she straightened up and took her glasses off. "I don't see anyone. She's right there, standing by the fence." My mother looked at the photo for another few seconds. Then she turned the page herself, looked at the next set of photos, and closed the album. "I don't know what you're seeing, Tomek. There's nobody there." My name is Tomasz Kowalski, but everyone calls me Tomek. My mother has called me Tomek since I was born. She doesn't lie to me, or at least, she never has in a way I've caught. She's blunt. She'll tell me my haircut looks bad. She'll tell me I'm gaining weight. She told me when I was 16 that my father wasn't coming back and I should stop expecting birthday cards. She does not spare feelings for the sake of comfort. So when she told me she didn't see anyone in those photos, I believed that she believed it. But I also trusted my own eyes. I took the album home. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, about 20 minutes from my mother's house. The building is old but solid. I inspected it myself before signing the lease, which my landlord thought was funny. I set the album on my kitchen table and went through every photo again under the overhead light. She was in 41 of 47 photographs. I counted twice. I started looking more carefully at the ones where she didn't appear. 2 of them were indoor shots, one in our living room, one at what looked like a doctor's office. The framing was tight, no windows visible, no background space. 2 others were blurred enough that I couldn't make out background details at all. The last 2 were me alone, close up, and there simply wasn't room in the frame for anyone behind me. In other words, in every photograph with enough background to show her, she was there. I have a magnifying glass I use for work sometimes, checking fine print on permits, reading serial numbers on electrical panels. I used it on the photos. At that magnification, the grain of the film made everything soft, but I could see more. The blouse she wore in the early photos had a pattern of small flowers, maybe, or dots. In later photos, the ones from when I was 7 or 8, she appeared to be wearing darker clothes. In one photo, taken at what looked like a park, I could almost see her face. Almost. The magnifying glass trembled in my hand and the image swam and I couldn't hold it steady enough. But there was the impression of features, eyes, a nose, a mouth, not smiling, not frowning, just present. I put the magnifying glass down and closed the album. It was past midnight. I hadn't eaten dinner. I made a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter, and then I went to bed and didn't sleep well. The next morning I called my mother and asked if there were other photo albums. Why? I just want to see more of the old pictures. There's a box in the hall closet upstairs, and maybe one in the spare room. I don't know. You can come look. I drove back down to Garfield Ridge after work. It was already dark. November in Chicago means darkness by 5. The house smelled like soup. My mother was watching the news with the volume too high. I found 2 more albums in the hall closet, and one in the spare bedroom. I also found a shoebox of loose photos that had never been put into an album. I took everything and spread it across the dining room table. The second album covered roughly the same years as the first, with some overlap. Different photos, same period. Me at various ages from infancy to about 10. She was in these photos too. The third album was later me from about 11 to 15. The photos were sparser. By this point, my mother had started using disposable cameras less and less, and I recognized some of the pictures as ones I'd seen before, framed on the mantel or pinned to the corkboard in the kitchen. I'd looked at some of these photos hundreds of times. I had never noticed the woman. But she was there. In a photo of me standing outside my middle school, she was visible through the glass doors of the entrance, inside the building, standing in the hallway. In a photo of me at a White Sox game, I was maybe 12, holding a hot dog, my mother's arm visible at the edge of the frame. The woman was 3 rows behind us, slightly out of focus, but unmistakable. She'd been at the game. She'd been inside my school. The shoebox photos were the most disturbing. They were candid, many of them taken quickly, blurred, off-center, poorly lit. A lot of them showed everyday moments. Me watching television, me doing homework, me asleep on the couch. In a photo of me sleeping on the couch, taken from the doorway of the living room, the woman was visible through the window behind the couch. She was standing on the sidewalk. It was night. She was facing the house. I sat at my mother's dining room table and felt something shift inside my chest, like a gear engaging that hadn't moved in years. I had lived in this house for 18 years. I had walked those sidewalks. I had slept on that couch 1,000 times, and someone had been standing outside watching me, and my mother had photographed it accidentally or otherwise, and no one had ever said a word. I brought the photos to my mother in the living room. I showed her 5 of them, one at a time, pointing directly at the woman each time. She looked. She tried. I could see her trying. Tomek, I don't know what to tell you. I don't see what you're seeing. There's a woman standing right here. Look right here. My mother took the photo from me and held it under the lamp. She looked for a long time, then she handed it back. Maybe it's a shadow or someone walking by. You know how the old cameras were, they picked up everything. She's in every single photo, Mom. Then maybe she was a neighbor. Mrs. Pollack used to walk her dog at all hours. This isn't Mrs. Pollack. My mother turned back to the television. Not dismissively, she wasn't angry. She was done with the conversation the way she gets done with conversations, like a door closing quietly. She couldn't see what I was seeing, or she wouldn't see it. And either way, the result was the same. I drove home with all the albums and the shoebox on the passenger seat. I want to be clear about something. I am not a person who sees things. I don't believe in ghosts. I've never had a paranormal experience. I've been to therapy twice in my life. Once after my father left. Once after a relationship ended badly in my late 20s. And both times the therapist told me I was unusually grounded. You deal in facts, Dr. Nowak said. That's healthy, but make sure you leave room for feelings too. I deal in facts. And the fact was, there was a woman in my childhood photographs who should not have been there, who appeared in dozens of images across more than a decade, and who my mother either could not or would not acknowledge. I spent the next week going through every photo. I organized them chronologically as best I could, using context clues: my age, the season, recognizable events. I made a spreadsheet. I noted her position in each photo, her distance from me, what she appeared to be wearing, whether she was indoors or outdoors. Some patterns, she was always behind me. Never to the side, never in front, always behind, as if she were positioned relative to whatever direction I was facing. She never appeared to be moving. In every photo she was standing still, feet together or close together, arms at her sides, no bag, no purse, no phone, just standing. She was never closer than about 10 feet, usually further 20, 30 feet, sometimes at the very edge of the frame, but never close. Her clothing changed over the years, but gradually, the way a real person's wardrobe shifts. Light colors in the early photos, darker in the later ones. In photos taken indoors, she was always visible through a window or doorway, as if she couldn't or wouldn't enter whatever space I was in. I kept this to myself. I didn't tell anyone, not my mother again, not my co-worker Dale, not the woman I'd been seeing casually for a few months, Erin. I told myself I was just being thorough. I told myself I was going to figure it out and then it would make sense and I would move on. On Saturday, I drove to the Harold Washington Library downtown and spent 4 hours looking through old microfilm of the neighborhood newspaper. I didn't know what I was looking for. Missing persons maybe, unsolved crimes, anything that might explain why a woman would have been watching a child for years. I found nothing useful. Garfield Ridge in the 1990s was what it had always been: Polish and Irish families, bungalows, the Midway Airport flight path overhead, nothing remarkable, no crimes that matched, no missing women that fit the description. I tried a different approach. I pulled up property records for our house, 5341 South Narragansett. My mother had bought it in 1990, the year I was born. Before that, it had been owned by a couple named Wojcik. Before them, a man named Brennan. I traced it back to 1952, when the house was built. No deaths on the property that I could find, no incidents. I looked at the neighboring houses too. Nothing. I went home and looked at the photos again. I spent an hour on the one from the park, the one where I could almost see her face. I used my phone to take a high-resolution photo of the original, then zoomed in digitally. The face was still blurred, but I could see enough to know that she wasn't old. She was young, younger than my mother, maybe mid-20s. And she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at me. At the version of me that was 6 years old and playing on a swing set and had no idea anyone was watching. I didn't plan what happened next. It grew on its own, the way mold grows slowly in conditions you're not paying attention to. I started carrying one of the photos with me. The one from the park. I kept it in my jacket pocket. During inspections, I would sometimes take it out and look at it, standing in someone else's kitchen or basement, just studying the figure in the background while the homeowner waited upstairs. I told myself I was working on it, solving it. But I wasn't doing anything. I was just looking at her. I started dreaming about her. Not frightening dreams, quiet ones. In the dreams, I was always a child and I was always in familiar places: the house, the schoolyard, the sidewalk on Narragansett. And she was always there behind me, at her usual distance. Sometimes I would turn around in the dream, and she would be there, and I would feel something that wasn't fear. It was closer to recognition, like seeing someone you know but can't place. I woke from those dreams feeling not scared but sad, a heavy chest-deep sadness that I couldn't attach to anything specific. It stayed with me through the morning, through my coffee, through the drive to work. It was the sadness of having lost something I couldn't name. Erin noticed. We were at her apartment one evening. She lives up in Albany Park, a small place above a laundromat, and she asked me what was wrong. "You've been somewhere else for 2 weeks," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Work is busy." "Tomek, you've checked your phone like 15 times since you got here, and you're not even reading anything. You're just staring at it." She was right. I had the photo on my phone now, the digital version I'd taken. I'd been zooming in again, looking at the woman's face, trying to make the pixels resolve into something recognizable. It's nothing, an old photo. I'm trying to figure out who someone is. Who? Someone in the background, probably nobody. Erin let it go. She's good that way, she doesn't push. She teaches 4th grade in Logan Square and has the patience of someone who spends all day with 9-year-olds. But I could feel her watching me, and I knew that probably nobody had sounded exactly as unconvincing as it was. The next day I did something I'm not proud of. I called in sick to work first time in 3 years and drove to the neighborhood where I grew up, not to my mother's house, to the park, Hale Park, on 55th and Narragansett. A small park basketball court, playground, a few benches, some trees. I'd played there as a kid. The photo was taken there. I stood on the grass near where the swing set used to be. It had been replaced with a newer one, and looked toward where the woman had been standing in the photo. She would have been near the fence on the south side, just standing on the grass between the playground and the sidewalk. I walked to that spot and stood there. I don't know what I expected. I stood there for 20 minutes and nothing happened, and I felt like an idiot, and I went home. But something changed after that, something I didn't notice right away. I started going back, not every day. At first it was once a week, then twice. I would drive to the park after work, or to the block where my mother's house was, or to the schoolyard at St. Camillus where I'd gone to elementary school. I would stand in the places where the woman had been standing in the photographs. I would look at the buildings, the sidewalks, the windows, from her perspective. I told myself I was investigating, retracing her positions, trying to understand the geometry of her surveillance, but that's not what I was doing. I was learning how she had seen me. I was standing where she had stood and looking at the places where I had been, and I was experiencing something that frightened me in a way I couldn't articulate because it felt good. It felt like putting on a pair of glasses and seeing clearly for the first time. It felt like I was finally looking at the world from the right angle. One evening in early December, I was standing outside my mother's house across the street, in the spot where the woman had been in the photo of me on the front steps. My mother's lights were on. I could see the living room through the front window, the blue flicker of the television. I had been standing there for maybe 10 minutes when the front door opened and my mother came out onto the porch. "Tomek? Hey, Mom. What are you doing out here?" I was going to come in. I was going to knock. You were standing out here in the dark. I saw you from the window." "I'm sorry. I was just thinking." She stared at me. She was wearing her housecoat and slippers, and the porch light made her face look older than it was. She didn't look angry. She looked scared. "Come inside," she said. I went inside. She made tea. We sat at the kitchen table and she didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "Are you still looking at those pictures?" "A little." "Tomek, I want you to stop." "Mom, I'm asking you to stop. Throw them away, and I don't care, but stop looking at them." "Why?" She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at the table. She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. "Because I've seen this before," she said. I waited. The refrigerator hummed. A plane passed over, low and slow, on its way to Midway. "Your grandmother," she said. "My mother, before she died. She found pictures too, old ones from Poland. She said there was a woman in them in the background, always in the background. She couldn't stop looking at them. She became different. She stopped going out. She sat at the table with the pictures, and she talked about this woman like she knew her, like she missed her. What happened? She got sick. She stopped eating. She died in 1987. You weren't born yet. I was pregnant with you. You never told me this. There was nothing to tell. She was old. She had a hard life. Her mind went. It happens. But she saw the same thing. A woman in the photos. My mother's hands tightened on the mug. There was nothing in the photos. I looked. My father looked. There was nothing there. She was seeing things. Mom, I'm not seeing things. I can show you. I know you believe that. She believed it too. We sat there. The clock in the hallway ticked. I didn't know what to say. My mother looked at me the way she looks at a problem she can't fix, a leaking roof, a broken appliance, with a kind of patient, exhausted calculation. Promise me you'll stop, she said. Okay. Promise me. I promise. I lied. I drove home with the album still in my apartment, and I looked at the photos again that night, and I felt the lie sitting in my stomach like something I'd swallowed that wouldn't dissolve. My grandmother's name was Helena. She died 7 months before I was born. My mother rarely talked about her, and when she did, it was in practical terms. She was a good cook. She kept a clean house. She worked at the meatpacking plant on Ashland for 22 years. She had come from a small village near Krakow in 1959 and never went back. My grandfather Stanislaw had died in 1981. Heart attack at 54. I had almost nothing of my grandmother's. A few pieces of jewelry my mother kept in her bedroom. A prayer card from the funeral. No photos that I knew of. But my mother had said she found pictures. Old ones, from Poland. I went back to the house 2 days later, while my mother was at her weekly card game at the church. I let myself in with my key and went through the upstairs closet systematically, the way I search a house for code violations, methodically, room by room. In the back of my mother's bedroom closet, behind a stack of blankets, I found a small wooden box. It was the size of a cigar box, but heavier, made of dark wood, with no label or decoration. I opened it. Inside were photographs, maybe 30 of them, small and square, the kind from the 1950s and early 1960s. Black and white, some with scalloped edges. They showed a young woman, my grandmother, I assumed, though I'd never seen a picture of her this young in various settings. A field, a village street, the doorway of a stone building, a garden. I took them to the kitchen and spread them out under the light. In every photograph that showed enough background, there was a figure standing behind my grandmother, a woman, dark-haired, still, watching. The photos were 65 years old. The woman in them looked the same as the woman in mine, not similar, the same hair, the same posture, the same stillness, the same distance. My hands were shaking. I sat down at the table and pressed my palms flat against the surface until they stopped. Then I picked up one of the photos, my grandmother as a teenager, standing in front of a wooden fence, and held it up next to one of my photos, me at 6, standing in front of our chain-link fence. Same woman, same position, same angle relative to the subject, same flat, patient, unwavering attention. I put all of my grandmother's photos back in the box and took the box home. I added them to the spreadsheet. I documented each one. The women, or the woman, because I was now certain it was one woman, appeared in 24 of 31 photos. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to think clearly. A woman had been appearing in photos of my family for at least 70 years. She didn't age. She was always in the background. She was always watching. My grandmother had seen her and become obsessed and wasted away. My mother couldn't see her at all. I could see her. And I was already what? I wasn't wasting away. I was eating fine. I was going to work. But I was standing in parking lots in the dark. I was lying to people. I was spending every free hour looking at photographs. I tried to formulate the question that mattered. What does she want? But another question was already forming underneath it. One I didn't want to acknowledge. Why doesn't it bother me that she's there? Because it didn't. That was the truth I'd been avoiding. The sadness I felt when I looked at the photos wasn't fear. It was longing. Like looking at pictures of a place you lived once and can never go back to. The woman in the photos felt like she belonged there. She felt like she was supposed to be there. And the thought of all those years she'd spent watching me patiently, silently, never approaching, never intruding, didn't fill me with horror. It filled me with something warm and heavy and impossible to name. That was when I should have stopped. That was the moment where, if I'd been someone else, I would have put the albums in a dumpster and called a therapist and never looked at them again. But I wasn't someone else. I was the person my grandmother had been before she died. I was the person my mother was afraid I was becoming. And I didn't stop. In mid-December, I did something new. I took a photo of myself. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, activated the timer, and stood at the far end of the kitchen with the window behind me. The photo came out unremarkable. Me in a flannel shirt, the window showing the dark courtyard of the building, the yellowed brick of the opposite wall. No woman. I tried again, in different rooms at different times of day. I took photos in the bathroom, in the bedroom, in the hallway. I propped the phone up at work and took pictures of myself standing in front of houses I was inspecting. Nothing. No figure. No woman. Just me and whatever was behind me. I felt disappointed. And then I felt sick at my own disappointment. The following Saturday, I asked Erin to take my picture. We were walking along the lakefront near Northerly Island. It was cold, and the lake was the color of steel, and the wind was coming off the water in gusts that made my eyes water. I gave her my phone and asked her to take a few shots. She thought it was funny. "Since when do you want pictures of yourself?" "I just want to remember the day." She took 4 photos. I smiled in some, didn't in others. The lake behind me, the skyline, the gray sky. I checked them as soon as she handed the phone back, zooming in on the background immediately, and Erin noticed. "What are you looking for?" "Nothing, just seeing how they turned out." In the 3rd photo, standing on the concrete path about 40 feet behind me, between 2 bare trees, there was a woman. Dark hair, still, looking directly at me. Erin hadn't noticed. She was stamping her feet and complaining about the cold. I stared at the photo on my screen. The woman was real. She was in a contemporary photo taken 10 minutes ago in a place I could walk back to right now. I turned around. The path behind me was empty. The trees were bare. A jogger passed in the distance. No one was standing between the trees. "Can we go?" Erin said. "I can't feel my face." I looked at the photo again. She was still there. I don't know how to describe the next 2 weeks, except to say that I became 2 people. There was the Tomek who went to work, filed reports, made small talk with Dale about the bears and about the cold snap, and about whether the new building codes were going to bankrupt half the contractors in the city. That Tomek ate lunch, returned calls, drove to inspections, did his job competently. And there was the other Tomek, the one who came home every night and sat at the kitchen table with the photos spread out in front of him like a card game he was trying to win. The one who took pictures of himself constantly in grocery stores, on sidewalks, in the bathroom mirror, and checked each one with a frantic, hungry attention. She appeared in roughly 1 out of every 5 photos now. Never in selfies. Never in photos he took of himself. Only in photos taken by someone else. Or in photos taken with a timer where he didn't know exactly when the shutter would click. As if she only appeared when I wasn't controlling the frame. I started asking strangers to take my picture. At the coffee shop near my apartment. On the platform at the Orange Line station. Outside a grocery store on Halstead. People looked at me strangely. A grown man asking for photos of himself. Alone, in mundane locations. But they did it. Chicago politeness. They did it and walked away quickly. She appeared in about half of these photos. Always behind me. Always at a distance. Always watching. I printed the new ones at a Walgreens and added them to the collection. I pinned them to the wall above my desk, next to the old ones. The timeline now stretched from 1958 to 2028. 70 years. Same woman. Same posture. Same face as far as I could tell. She hadn't aged. She hadn't changed. She had watched my grandmother grow up in a village in Poland, and now she was watching me buy coffee in Bridgeport. Erin came over for the first time in weeks. I'd been avoiding having her at my place and saw the wall. Tomek, what is this? I tried to explain. I showed her the photos. I showed her the woman. I pointed, the way I'd pointed for my mother. Erin looked where I was pointing. She looked for a long time. She was trying, genuinely trying, the way you try to see one of those stereogram images staring, adjusting, willing it to appear. I see people in the backgrounds, she said carefully. I see strangers walking by. I don't know what you're seeing, Tomek. I see random people. She's not random. She's in all of them. Look at this one and this one, same person. Erin looked at the two photos I was holding up. One from 1994. One from 2 weeks ago. She looked at them for a long time. I see two different people. Tomek, these are different people. It's the same person. Honey, one of these photos is 30 years old. These are not the same person. She doesn't age. Erin went quiet. She put the photos down carefully, the way you handle something fragile. And she looked at me, not at the wall, at me. When was the last time you slept a full night? She asked. I sleep fine. Tomek, I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were crazy. I'm asking when you last slept. I couldn't remember. I'd been staying up late, getting up early. The hours between midnight and 6 had become photo hours, sorting, comparing, documenting. I'd lost weight. My clothes were looser. I hadn't noticed until Erin said it, but my hands were thinner than they used to be. I think you should talk to someone, she said. A doctor. Anyone. There's nothing wrong with me. There's a wall of photographs with red lines drawn between them, and you've lost 15 pounds, and you just told me a woman in a 60-year-old photo doesn't age. Tomek, please. I got angry then. Not at Erin, at the situation, at the impossibility of having evidence that only I could see, at the loneliness of knowing something true and being unable to share it. You can go, I said. Erin left. She texted me that night, I care about you. Please call Dr. Nowak. I didn't respond. Christmas came and went. I went to my mother's house for dinner. She watched me the way she'd been watching me since November, carefully from a distance, like she was monitoring a patient. We didn't talk about the photos. We ate pierogi and watched a movie, and she hugged me at the door and held on longer than usual. On New Year's Eve, alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I was going to find her. Not in photos, in person. She existed. The recent photos proved it. She was physically present in the places where my pictures were taken. She was standing behind me at the lakefront, in the coffee shop, on the train platform. She was real, and she was nearby. And if I could just turn around at the right moment, I would see her. I developed a system. I set up a camera in my apartment, a digital camera on a tripod, aimed at the window behind my desk. I connected it to my laptop and wrote a simple script. Dale helped me without asking why. That would take a photo every 30 seconds. If she appeared in photographs taken when I wasn't controlling the frame, then eventually, sitting at my desk with my back to the window, the camera would capture her. It took 3 days. On the third night, at 2:47 a.m., the camera took a photo of me sitting at my desk, with my head in my hands. Behind me, through the window, standing on the fire escape in the January cold, was the woman. The image was sharper than any I'd had before. The camera was better. The distance was shorter. She was only about 8 feet behind me, separated by a pane of glass. I could see her face. She looked like me. Not exactly, not like a twin, but like a relative. The shape of her jaw, the set of her eyes, the way her mouth rested. She looked like a Kowalski. She looked like she could have been my grandmother's sister. She looked like she could have been my mother. She looked like she could have been mine. She was wearing a dark dress, simple and unadorned. Her hands were at her sides. Her hair was dark and fell just past her shoulders. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning. She was looking at me through the glass with an expression I can only describe as patient, like someone waiting for something they know is coming. I turned around. The fire escape was empty. The window showed nothing but the dark courtyard and the brick wall opposite. She was gone. She was only ever there when I wasn't looking. I turned back to the laptop. The next photo, taken 30 seconds later, showed the empty fire escape. She had been there for one frame, 30 seconds of existence, looking at me through the glass. I enlarged the photo until her face filled the screen. I looked at it for a long time. and I said out loud, in my empty apartment at 3 in the morning, "Who are you?" The apartment was silent. The heater ticked. The refrigerator hummed. I said it again. "Who are you? What do you want?" Nothing. I looked at the photo, at her face, at the patience in it, and something occurred to me that I hadn't allowed myself to think. Maybe she wasn't watching me. Maybe she was waiting for me. In late January, my mother fell. She slipped on ice outside the church and broke her hip. The surgery went well, but she was in the hospital for a week and then in a rehab facility in Palace Hills. I visited every day. The selling of the house was put on hold. My mother, in her hospital bed, looked small and uncertain for the first time I could remember. "Tomek," she said one evening. I was sitting beside her bed, eating a sandwich from the cafeteria. "I need to tell you something about those pictures." I put the sandwich down. "I can see her," my mother said. The room was quiet. A nurse laughed somewhere down the hall. "I've always seen her," my mother said. "I saw her in your photos. I saw her in my mother's photos. I've seen her my whole life." "Why did you say you couldn't?" "Because I thought if you believed she wasn't there, you'd stop looking. That's what my father did for my mother. He told her there was nothing there. He told her she was imagining it. And she believed him for a while, and it was better. She stopped looking. She went back to normal. And then one day she found the photos again, and she started looking again, and she didn't stop until she died." My mother's eyes were wet. She looked at the ceiling. My father burned the photos after she died. He burned all of them. Every picture from Poland, every picture from the old country. He said he never wanted to see them again. And I thought if I did the same thing, if I made you think there was nothing there. Mom. But you see her. You've always been able to see her, just like my mother, just like me. You see her too, in person? My mother shook her head. "Only in photos. I've never seen her in person. I've never seen her anywhere except in pictures." "But you, Tomek, you're looking for her in person. You're trying to find her. That's different. That's what my mother did." "What happened to your mother, really?" My mother closed her eyes. She started going out at night, walking. She said she was trying to find the woman. She said she needed to see her face to face. She walked every night for months. She lost weight. She stopped sleeping. She stopped talking to us. And then one night in February she went out, and she didn't come back until morning. And when she came back she was there. Physically, but she wasn't there, do you understand? She was in the house, but she was gone. And 3 weeks later she died. What killed her? The doctor said pneumonia. But she was healthy before. She was strong. She just left. Like something took her out of herself, and there was nothing left to keep the body going. I sat with that. The sandwich sat on my lap, getting cold. "Tomek, you have to stop looking for her." "What if I can't?" "You can. You're stronger than my mother was. You're practical. You're like your grandfather. You deal with what's real." "She is real, Mom. She's in the photos. She was on my fire escape." My mother reached for my hand. Her grip was weaker than it used to be, but it was firm. "I know she's real. I've never said she isn't real, but real things can still destroy you." I tried to stop. For 2 weeks I tried. I put the albums in the closet. I took down the photos from the wall. I deleted the camera script from my laptop. I went to work. I called Erin and apologized, and she forgave me cautiously, and we went to dinner at a Thai place on Archer and talked about her students and the weather and anything that wasn't photographs. For 2 weeks, I was fine. And then I started noticing her without photographs. Not seeing her. Noticing. The way you notice someone's absence. I would be walking to my car after work, and I would feel the space behind me, the 30 feet of empty sidewalk, and I would know it was supposed to be occupied. I would be sitting at my desk doing paperwork, and I would feel the window at my back like a held breath, and I would know she was supposed to be there, looking in, patient and still. It was like having phantom limb syndrome for a presence I'd never touched. She was supposed to be there, and she wasn't, and the absence was worse than the presence had ever been. I started taking photos again, just a few, just to check. I asked Dale to take my picture at a job site, and there she was, standing near a dumpster behind me. I asked a barista to take my photo, and there she was, visible through the window on the sidewalk. Every time she appeared, the tightness in my chest eased. She was still there. She hadn't left. And I realized with a clarity that felt like the ground shifting under my feet, that I wasn't afraid of her. I was afraid of losing her. I was afraid that one day I would take a photo and she wouldn't be there, and I would be alone in the frame the way I'd been alone in every other part of my life. My father gone, my grandmother dead before I was born, my mother behind a closed door, Erin at arm's length. Every relationship I'd ever had kept at the same careful distance I kept everything. The woman in the photos was the most consistent presence I'd ever had. She had been there before I was born. She had watched me as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, as a man. She had never left. She had never looked away. She had never gotten bored or tired or busy. She had stood in the cold and the dark and the rain, and she had watched me, and she had waited. What was I supposed to do with that? In February, I went back to my mother's house. She was home from rehab, moving slowly, using a walker. The house was cold. She'd turned the heat down to save money, the way she always did. I turned it back up and made her dinner. After she went to bed, I went into the basement. I found what I was looking for in a box I'd missed during the initial cleaning, a small box, pushed behind the water heater, covered in dust. Inside were 3 things: a rosary, a folded piece of paper, and a photograph. The photograph was of a woman, not in the background, not behind someone. A portrait, taken deliberately, close up. She was looking directly at the camera. Her face was clear. It was her. She looked exactly as she did in every other photo. Young, dark-haired. That face that looked like my face, like my mother's face, like the face of every Kowalski woman going back generations. But in this photo, she wasn't watching. She was posing. Someone had asked her to stand still and look at the camera, and she had. The folded paper was a letter written in Polish. My Polish is limited. My mother spoke it at home, but I never became fluent. I could make out some words. Siostra, sister, Zausa, always, nie odchodź, don't leave. I took the photo and the letter home. I spent the next day with a Polish dictionary and an online translator, working through the letter word by word. It was written by my great-grandmother, my grandmother Helena's mother, and it was addressed to someone named Agata. My grandmother's family name was Zielinski before marriage, and I had never heard of an Agata Zielinski. The letter was dated 1953. It read roughly, "Dear Agata, I have kept our promise. I have watched for you in every picture, as mother watched, as grandmother watched. You are always there. You are always behind us. We carry you and you carry us. When I am gone, Helena will watch for you. She has the eyes. She will see you. But I must ask you, sister, do not take her the way you took Aunt Marta. Do not call her out at night. Do not let her walk to you. I know you are lonely. I know it has been so long. But let her live. Let her have her life. Watch her, but do not call her. If you must have someone, wait. There will be others. There will always be others in our family who can see you. Let them come to you when they are ready. Don't leave us, but don't take us. Your loving sister, Katarzyna." I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it down and looked at the portrait of Agata, a sister, not a stranger, not a ghost in the traditional sense, a family member, someone named Agata Zielinski who had been what? Who had died, presumably, and had continued to appear in photographs, watching her family, watching the women of her family, watching me. I did the math. If Katarzyna was my great-grandmother, and Agata was her sister, then Agata was my grandmother's aunt. If the letter was written in 1953, and the oldest photos of Agata in the background were from the 1950s, then she had been watching for at least 70 years. But the letter mentioned a mother and grandmother who had also watched for her, which meant Agata had been present in this form, in the background of photographs, standing still and watching for much longer, perhaps since the invention of photography, perhaps longer in ways no camera could capture. And the letter said, "Do not let her walk to you. Do not call her out at night." I thought about my grandmother, walking the streets at night trying to find her. I thought about myself, standing in parking lots, standing where she had stood, learning to see the world through her eyes. The letter said, "Let them come to you when they are ready." My great-grandmother had been afraid that Agata would take Helena. But that's not what happened, was it? Helena had gone to Agatha. She had walked out at night and found her and been consumed by her. It wasn't that Agatha was hunting us. It was that we were walking toward her. Every generation, someone in the family could see her, and that seeing became a fixation, and the fixation became a need, and the need drove them out of their houses and into the dark to find her. And Agatha waited, patiently, at her distance, never approaching, never forcing, just standing there in the background of our lives until we came to her. I looked at the portrait again, at her face, at those eyes that looked like my eyes. She was lonely. That was the thing I could see in her face that no one else could see. She was lonely, and she had been lonely for a very long time, and she wanted someone to come to her, and she was willing to wait forever. I should have been terrified. I know that. I know what the letter was warning about. I know what happened to my grandmother. I know that my mother had spent my entire life trying to protect me from exactly this. But what I felt, looking at Agatha's portrait at 3 a.m. in my apartment in Bridgeport, was not terror. It was the feeling I'd had the first day I found the album, that deep, chest-level sadness, that sense of something lost. Except now I knew what was lost. It was her. She was the lost thing. She had been lost for generations, standing behind us in photographs, visible only to those of us who had whatever genetic or spiritual inheritance allowed us to see her, and no one had ever gone to her and come back. My grandmother hadn't come back, but maybe that was because no one had told her it was possible to visit without staying. Maybe no one had ever tried to set terms. Maybe no one had ever said, "I see you, and I'll come to you, but I'm going to leave again." I am not stupid. I know how this sounds. I know I sound like every person who has ever rationalized walking toward the thing that will destroy them. I know I sound like my grandmother must have sounded in 1987, putting on her coat and shoes at midnight, walking out into the February cold, convinced that this time she would find the woman, and this time it would be different. But I also know what I feel, and I feel her absence like a missing tooth, a gap in the architecture of my life where something is supposed to be. I've felt it since I was a child. I just didn't know what it was until I found the photographs. I started going out at night, not to look for her. At least that's what I told myself. I was just walking. Bridgeport at midnight is quiet. The bars close, the traffic thins, the streetlights make orange pools on the sidewalks. I walked the residential blocks, past bungalows and 2 flats, past chain-link fences and dormant gardens. It was cold. February. My breath made clouds. I didn't see her, but I felt the space behind me differently on those walks. The 30 feet of empty sidewalk felt inhabited, like she was there, at her usual distance, matching my pace. Patient. Waiting. I set up the camera again. This time I pointed it out the window, aimed at the fire escape and the courtyard beyond. I let it run while I went walking. When I came home and checked the photos, she was there, not on the fire escape this time, but standing in the courtyard below, looking up at my window. In one photo, taken at 1:14 a.m., she was standing directly below the fire escape, and her face was tilted upward, and for the first time in any photograph, she was doing something other than simply watching. She was reaching. One arm extended upward toward my window, palm open, not grasping, offering, or asking. I couldn't tell which. I stared at that photo for an hour. I enlarged it, printed it, pinned it to the wall. Her hand, pale in the courtyard light, reaching toward where I lived. The next night I went out at 2 a.m. I walked downstairs and out the back door and into the courtyard. It was freezing. I was wearing sweatpants and a coat thrown over my t-shirt. The courtyard was empty concrete, dumpsters, the brick walls of the surrounding buildings. I stood where she had stood in the photograph and looked up at my window. My apartment light was on. I could see the edge of my desk, the glow of the laptop screen. From this angle, the window looked warm and inviting. I understood standing there why she stood where she stood. She was looking at the light. She was looking at the warmth. She was standing in the cold and looking at everything she couldn't have. "Agatha," I said. My voice sounded strange in the empty courtyard. Too loud, too real. "Agatha, I'm here." Nothing happened. The courtyard stayed empty. The cold crept through my coat. "I found the letter. I know who you are. I know you've been watching us, watching me." Silence. A car passed on the street beyond the building. I'm not afraid of you. That was true. I wasn't. I don't know what you need from me, but I'm here. I stood there for a long time, maybe 20 minutes, long enough for the cold to become painful, for my fingers to go numb, for my breath to feel like ice in my lungs. Nothing happened. No one appeared. The courtyard was just a courtyard. I went back upstairs and checked the camera. The last photo before I'd gone outside showed the empty courtyard. The first photo taken while I was outside showed me standing in the courtyard, alone. But in the photo taken as I was walking back inside, a photo that showed the courtyard from above, the back door of the building, my figure half turning to go in there, was someone beside me. Not behind me, beside me, close enough to touch. A woman with dark hair standing at my left shoulder, her face turned toward mine. She was smiling. It was the first time in 70 years of photographs that Agatha was smiling. I have not told my mother about any of this. She is recovering from her hip surgery and she is worried about me, and I don't want to make it worse. When I visit her, I eat her food and talk about work and tell her I'm sleeping fine. She doesn't believe me, but she accepts it. I have not spoken to Erin in 3 weeks. She texted me once. I hope you're okay. I'm here if you need me. I didn't respond. I will. I'll respond eventually. But right now, I can't explain what's happening to me. And I can't pretend it isn't happening. And I can't be with someone who sees a different world than I do. I still go to work. I still inspect houses. Last week I was in a basement in McKinley Park, checking the foundation. And I found a crack that ran the full length of the wall, a crack that the homeowner had been patching and repatching for years, filling it with caulk and paint, pretending it wasn't structural. I put it in my report. The house needs major foundation work. The homeowner was upset. He said he'd been living there for 20 years and the house was fine. The house is standing, I told him. But the foundation is compromised. You can keep patching it, but the crack will keep coming back because the problem isn't the crack. The problem is underneath. He didn't want to hear it. No one ever wants to hear it. I take photographs of myself every day now. I ask colleagues, strangers, anyone. She is in almost all of them. She is closer than she used to be. In recent photos, she's only 10 or 15 feet behind me. Sometimes closer. In one photo from last week, taken by Dale outside a job site in Pilsen, she is standing directly behind me, close enough that if she reached out, she could touch my shoulder. I have started sleeping less, but not because of anxiety or obsession. I sleep less because the hours between midnight and dawn have become something else, a different kind of waking, a different quality of attention. I sit at my desk with the window behind me, and I feel her there, on the fire escape or in the courtyard, and the feeling is not fear, it is company. It is the end of a loneliness I have carried so long I forgot it was there. Last night, I went out to the courtyard again. 2:30 in the morning. Cold, but less cold than February. March is beginning, and the air has that raw, wet quality that means the thaw is coming. I stood in my usual spot and looked up at my window and said her name. And this time, I felt something. Not a sound, not a touch. A shift. The way the air changes when someone opens a door in another room. A feeling of space being occupied that wasn't occupied before. I turned around. She was standing at the edge of the courtyard, near the dumpsters, half in shadow. Real, present. Not a photograph, not a blur. A woman, physically there, looking at me with a face that looked like my face, with dark hair and a dark dress and an expression of such patient, aching, centuries-long loneliness that I felt my eyes fill with tears. "Agatha," I said. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She stood there the way she always stood, still, hands at her sides, watching, but she was here. She was actually here. I took a step toward her, and then another, and then I was standing in front of her, close enough to see the texture of her dress, close enough to see that her eyes were dark brown, close enough to see that she was crying or something like crying, something that looked like tears on a face that wasn't quite a face, that shifted in the shadows like a reflection on moving water. She reached out and put her hand on my chest. It was cold, not icy cold the way stone is cold, like something that hasn't been warm in a long time. I felt it through my shirt, I felt it in my ribs, and I felt something leave me. Not pain, not breath. Something smaller and harder to name. A boundary. A separation. The invisible wall between myself and the thing I'd been walking toward since November. She dropped her hand. She looked at me. And then she was gone. Not dramatically. Not in a flash or a fade. She was simply no longer there, the way a sound is no longer there after it stops. The courtyard was empty. I was alone. I went back upstairs. I checked the camera. The photos showed the empty courtyard, me standing in it, talking to no one. But the last photo, the one taken as I was walking back inside, showed a figure in the courtyard, alone, standing where I had stood, looking up at the window. It was me. I am writing this in my apartment. It's early morning. The light is gray through the window. I can hear the garbage truck on the next block, the distant murmur of the highway, a dog barking somewhere. I look the same. I checked. I looked in the mirror, and I am the same person I was yesterday. Same face, same height, same tired eyes. My hands are my hands. My voice is my voice. I am Tomasz Kowalski, building inspector, 38 years old, resident of Bridgeport. But something is different. I picked up my phone this morning and took a photo of myself, a selfie, held at arm's length, the kitchen wall behind me, and in the photo I am looking at the camera, normal, ordinary, and there is no one behind me. I went to work. I asked Dale to take my picture in the parking lot. I looked at the photo. Just me. Empty space behind me. No woman. No Agatha. She's gone. After 70 years, after a century, maybe longer, she's gone from the photographs. I should feel relieved. I should feel like I've been freed. My mother would be overjoyed. Erin would be overjoyed. The logical, practical deals in facts part of me should be celebrating. Instead, I feel the absence, that gap, that phantom limb. I feel the 30 feet of empty space behind me wherever I go, and it is truly empty now, and the emptiness is enormous. And there is something else. Something I noticed this morning and have been trying not to think about. I was walking to my car, and a woman was coming the other direction on the sidewalk with a child, a boy, maybe 4 or 5, holding her hand. They passed me, and the boy glanced up at me the way children do, briefly and without interest, and then they were past me and walking away. I stopped. I turned around. I watched them go. I stood on the sidewalk and I watched the boy's small back as he walked away from me, and I felt something that wasn't mine or that was mine in a way I don't have language for. A pull, a patience, a willingness to wait. I caught my reflection in a car window. I was standing very still. My hands were at my sides. My face was neutral. I was watching. I took out my phone and opened the camera. I turned it around and aimed it at myself, but at the last moment I tilted it just slightly so that the frame included the sidewalk behind me and the woman and the child walking away. I looked at the photo. The boy was in the center of the frame. His mother was beside him, holding his hand. They were maybe 30 feet away, walking normally, and behind them, standing on the sidewalk, still, watching, with a face that looked like no one in particular, and everyone in a family there was someone. I looked up from the phone. The sidewalk was empty. The woman and child had turned the corner. I looked at the photo again. The figure in the background was wearing a flannel shirt. I put the phone in my pocket. I got in my car. I drove to work. I did my job. I came home. I made dinner. I sat at the table. The apartment is quiet. The window behind me is dark. I don't know who I am anymore. Or maybe I know exactly who I am, and I always have, and the photographs were just the way of showing me. Maybe Agatha didn't leave. Maybe Agatha was never something that could leave, because Agatha was never separate from us, from my grandmother, from my mother, from me. Maybe she was the part of us that watches, the part that stands at the edge of things and waits, the part that doesn't age because it isn't alive in the way that living things are alive. And maybe, when she put her hand on my chest in the courtyard, she wasn't taking something from me. She was handing something back, a responsibility, an inheritance, a way of seeing that has been in my family for longer than cameras, longer than photographs, longer than anyone can remember. I don't go out at night anymore. I don't need to. The thing I was looking for isn't out there. It's in here, behind my ribs, in the quiet space between heartbeats where something watches and waits. My mother called tonight. She asked how I was. I told her I was fine. I told her I'd stopped looking at the photos. She sounded relieved. Good, she said. You sound better. I feel better. Come for dinner on Sunday? I'll be there. I will be there. I'll bring flowers. I'll eat her food and talk about the house sale and tell her about work. And when she takes a photo of me at the table, because she always takes a photo, she always has, I will smile, and the photo will show me alone, sitting at the table in the house where I grew up. And maybe in the background, through the window, or in the hallway, or at the very edge of the frame, there will be someone. Or maybe there won't. I don't check anymore. I already know. Or maybe there won't. I don't check anymore. I already know.